All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So, first of all, I just want to welcome you to the May edition of What's the Point, where we're going to ask and answer the question, what's the point of measuring engagement? My name is Michael Faulkner. I lead the solutions team here at Touchpoint, and joining me today is Chris Dolan, who leads our product and strategy division. We also have a special guest today, from one of our partner churches. Greg Goulet is joining us from Hill Country Bible Church, and he's going to give his perspective on the point behind measuring engagement as well. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. So if you've been part of this before, you know that we'll try to answer your questions at the very end. There is a button at the bottom for Q&A. Please just click that, put your question in there, and we'll answer it. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll do our best to respond via email when we wrap up the session today. All right, so let's take a quick look at the agenda where, as usual, I'm going to start things off. We'll need to switch over to the agenda. Chris, by the way, we're going to go show him some grace. This is his first time running the slideshow. He's real good at product and strategy, though.
Thanks,
so we're going to cut him slide.
I was trying to answer a question. Somebody asked if the recording will be made live, and yes, we will have a link to this. It will be sent out to all participants. And I was trying to answer that, and then I didn't for the slide. So thanks.
No problem. Thank you. So again, we're just going to kind of kick off at a very high level, just kind of touching on the topic of the day, which is, again, what's the point in measuring engagement? But then we're going to transition. I'm going to hand it over to Greg for a couple of minutes and have him shed some light, again, on his personal experience with the importance of measuring engagement at Hill Country Bible Church. And then we'll transition into really understanding how you can recognize the changes in engagement and how those changes can be impacting your church. And then we're going to wrap up with showing you some of the capabilities that are coming soon within the Touchpoint platform. And Chris will be leading that last section of the presentation. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with what's the point of measuring engagement. And really, when you look at the way that today's church is, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Chris. When you look at today's church, it's quite different than the churches that our parents, or depending on your age, grandparents attended when they were our age. I mean, even the smallest churches today can seem much larger than they were 50 plus years ago. And as a result, it's just a lot harder to pour into the lives of members and visitors. And sometimes unknown issues come up for which we could be ministering, but because we're not made aware of them, we're not able to minister to them. So, for example, many of you know that I used to lead middle school boys at my church, at my former church, and one of the sweetest kids was in my class. His name was Cole. He was an avid baseball player, and he attended my class about every third or fourth Sunday. And the reason for that was just he was always traveling on baseball tournaments. Well, last summer, when I dropped my son off for kids camp, Cole walked up and just had the sweetest smile on his face. And he goes, "Hi, Mr. Michael." And my heart just sank because I hadn't seen him in 6 months, and I didn't realize it until that moment. So if there's a better answer to the question, why are we measuring engagement? I don't know what that answer is, because at the end of the day, it would have been amazing if we could have somehow identified early on the potential issues that might have been going on in Cole's family that caused them to stop being engaged at the church. Now, one of the things that I love about our partner churches is that they help us develop Touchpoint to address the ministerial challenges that they face. And one of those churches is Hill Country Bible Church, located in Austin, Texas. And as I said before, Greg Goulet is one of their technology experts who's joining us today. And Greg came to us and said, I'd like to find a way to identify changes in engagement early on. And it really got us to thinking. So Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'd love for you to just kind of share your vision and maybe even some of the reasoning behind this idea that you brought to Touchpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. We really, at Hill Country, I've been there about 10 years. And I really came from a technology background and worked at Dell and Apple for several years. And, I started working at the church as a data analyst. I saw that we had different information about people we really didn't do anything with it that much. And so, I started looking for a way to see, if we knew someone's pattern of attendance, or we knew if they were in a group, or if they knew they were serving or giving or things like that, how could we serve them better? And then also when people started disengaging, we needed to reach out to them, but there was no way that we could do that. And so, I tried to kind of build some spreadsheets on my own and things like that. And, we kind of did some manual things and have been doing that for a while. And, we switched over to Touchpoint not too long ago. And I did have a conversation with Chris and Michael and some others, and said, hey, it'd be really cool if we could implement this into Touchpoint, where we could use what was important to each individual church. Again, that might be serving small groups or whatever. And then as we capture information about that, be able to use that to better minister to people. And it was kind of interesting because I had a general conversation with Chris, I think, and I didn't, we talked a bit about it and didn't think that too much about it for a while. And then all of a sudden, Chris contacts me and says, hey, I've got a mock-up of that engagement information. And I said, really? And so took a look at it. So just really excited that Touchpoint is rolling into the product, this engagement ability to see people's engagement so that we can better serve them in the ministry area. So yeah, just excited to see what this looks like and how this works, and just really excited to be a partner church with Touchpoint, where when you talk to them about something, they take it to heart, and if it's a good idea and other churches want it, they kind of can build to the actual product. So yeah, it's cool. Excited to see how this is going to work.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate that background. And, that's work. I'm excited as well. Chris gave us a little bit of a sneak peek a while ago, and both Greg and I were just like, man, this is going to be great. But the reality is we've always been able to to a degree, understand when we see changes of engagement, but it's always been in a reaction mode. And what do you do with those changes once you see them? And that's really what's important. So when we go to the next slide, when we're talking about measuring engagement, it's real easy to get wrapped up around, oh, well, it's just collecting data and it's Big Brother watching over us. It's not what it's about. It's much more than trying to simply capture data. What we're trying to do is we're trying to identify changes in engagement. So for example, maybe you are, you routinely check in on your ministries and try to identify who's there, but also, and much more importantly, you're trying to identify who's missing. Why? Because those people who are missing are the people who aren't engaged. Or maybe you're finding yourself asking, what's a popular activity or involvement at our church right now? Or if things seem to be slow from an engagement standpoint, maybe you're asking, are there just months where overall engagement declines? Sometimes we see ministries that seem to be losing steam, and it's easy to think that we're seeing a drop in engagement. But what if it's not that there's a drop in engagement? What if instead what we're seeing is that their focus has shifted somewhere else? So at the end of the day, it's important to identify the changes in engagement in order to accurately answer those questions above. But also on the next slide, once we identify changes in church engagement, those changes can actually do a number of things for us. So for example, take a ministry that is doing a really good job of engaging people. Well, what if we tap into that expertise to help other ministries grow as well, help those other ministries engage their people more effectively? I mean, at the risk of sounding silly, as the saying goes, rising tides do raise all boats. So let's tap into that expertise that we're seeing from particular ministries so that we can leverage that. And then on the next slide, we talked about how changes in engagement can be positive and can really help a ministry and how we can learn from that, but they can also be an early indicator of life change. Sometimes we're going to see a drop of engagement when someone loses their job, or right now we're dealing with inflation. Maybe people are having to take on an extra job because of the pressures of inflation. Sick families, again, that one has to reiterate what we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, but that can affect engagement. Faith struggles, I hate to say that, but some of the godliest people I know struggle with their faith from time to time, and that can affect engagement. Changes in just simple life circumstances, a birth of a child, empty nester, marriage, divorce, being a widow. The point is, the changes impact our engagement. And if we can identify the changes in engagement early enough, we have a better chance of meeting people where they need to be met most. So on the next slide, at the end of the day, a healthy church is a growing church. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm not referring to attendance here. When I say a healthy church is a growing church, I'm saying that healthy churches rely on steady engagement from their members in order to see growth in decisions for Christ, relationships with Christ being strengthened, volunteering activities like being a greeter or a teacher or an usher, missions involvement, both local and global, attending fellowship events, generosity. Are we seeing growth in generosity at our church? I mean, there are a number of ways that you can measure growth at your church and understand the kind of engagement that your church is seeing. But the undeniable truth is that engagement translates into growth, and measuring engagement provides an early indicator of growth or lack of growth. So what's the point of measuring engagement? Is to promote growth in the church, its membership, and its impact on the kingdom of God. The key is knowing how to measure engagement and what tools are available to help you measure it. And that is where Chris comes in. So Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Greg. Before I get into how to measure engagement, I just want to say a big thank you to Hill Country and so many of our partner churches who really help us wrestle through these challenges that you all face. We really do see ourselves as partners in ministry with you. And we like to roll up our sleeves and figure out, how do we solve these problems and how do we create tools that don't just measure more things or create more data. We're not doing this for data's sake. We're not doing it to create cool technology. Although at the end of the day, I think some of these tools are pretty cool. We're doing this to really help you grow your church, to grow deeper devoted followers of Christ, to help people be more engaged. And so we are thankful for you, Greg, and all that you've helped us kind of wrestle through, and so many people on this call who have helped kind of shape the tools that I'm about to share with you. So back to this question, how do you measure engagement? We already have some great tools, and much of what I'm about to show you is actually built upon those. And I'm going to start by talking about status. You've heard of status flags. That's kind of what they're called in the back end in terms of when you're building them. When they're on the record, we call them status badges. And there are some major changes that are coming to the way those work that I want to talk about first, because that is the foundation for measuring engagement, especially over time, and some of the things that Michael talked about and Greg is hoping to see. So some changes that you'll be able to see here in the coming weeks. This has been developed. It's in testing right now. There's quite a bit of testing before we're going to be able to roll this out comfortably. So bear with us. We're still trying to figure out what that timeline looks like, but it's really exciting. And actually, this is a screenshot of a live test environment. So pretty cool. All these badges that you see, you're going to be able to adjust the colors of these to your liking. So I just threw some colors in here. This doesn't look pretty. You can adjust them and add whatever colors you want, but including even some of these standard, like the primary adult, the position and family, the campus, the member status, all of those, all the way over. And then from the right of member to where you see that red 0, those are status badges. And so you will be able to create an unlimited number of those now. They'll be super easy to create. I'm going to show you that on the next screen. You'll be able to adjust the colors, and then there's going to be an engagement indicator out to the right, which is where that 0 is, with some arrows that show changes in that engagement and whether somebody is trending up or trending down. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. So this is kind of just giving you a glimpse of what is to come. Again, you can make this prettier. You can use your own colors on that. On the next screen, it shows, this is actually in the search builder, how you will build status flags. So you will no longer, it's not around how you name it. When you name it, you'll now have the option to check the box to make it a status flag. This is going to be available for I believe it's for administrators and anybody with, there's going to be a new role that's specifically for managing status flags. So not everybody on your church staff will be able to set status flags because they can do some pretty powerful things, and they actually can reveal data that potentially might be, you might want to limit to a role. Some things you see here is run order. That's important in case you're using other status flags in another status flag. So if you have, say, you have a status flag that is based on other status flags, those other ones would need to run earlier in the process. You can limit them to a role right here on this dialog box very simply, and this is a drop down of all the different roles that are available in your database. And then you can choose optionally whether to display this as a badge and what the color is. And don't worry, behind the scenes, you can actually adjust. There's 8 different colors, and you have the option to set those to whatever colors you want, but we have 8 default colors there for you, and you can adjust those. And then at the bottom, you'll see this ability to store a history. And so I'm kind of giving a preview of what's the next slide, but basically we're going to be able to store a history of those status flags over time. And then you can weight those status flags with a score or a point total that will add up to a total engagement. And the goal here, I just want to be clear, is not to, well, let me talk about that in a minute. But so what are some of those engagement markers? Like, what are the things that you might use to build different status flags? And I've listed a bunch of things here. I can tell you each of these things could be several different flags, like including attendance. For example, you might have multiple searches or multiple flags that give you different weights or different points based on, if somebody attends does something once a month or twice a month, you can just have those be additional points that can add up. So there's lots of different ways that you can build these, but here are some kind of ideas of things that you might want to measure or start tracking around giving, attendance, and that could be Sunday worship attendance. It could be maybe kids checking in. It could be one-off events or special events. It could be a lot of churches have small groups. That's a really key piece. So, there could be different engagement badges or status badges for say worship attendance or special event attendance versus like maybe even your small group or your community group, whatever your church calls them. Serving, there's lots of different ways that you can serve in different capacities, different levels of serving or different levels of leadership that you might want to track. Disciple making, churches a big thing these days I'm hearing is more and more about discipleship groups. So if people are in discipleship groups or leading discipleship groups, you might have a flag or a badge that tracks that. And then ministry specific things, men's ministry, women's ministry, children's ministry, and measuring levels of engagement within that might have unique or creative ways of measuring. There's also one-time things. Greg, I think, touched on this a little bit, but things like, your conversion or baptism or membership, these are things that happen once typically in your life. There could be other key milestones that you're measuring, like maybe, a new member class or a get engaged class, engaging with the church kind of class or other key milestones. So these are some ideas. You will know kind of what these are for your church, and every church looks a little bit different, but we just wanted to give you some ideas. And what I was talking about just a minute ago is, oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm actually going to skip to that. The idea here is not about, well, nope, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to here. I'm skipping around. So if we took 2 people here in our system, and I just pulled 2 random profiles out of one of our kind of demo systems, it's one of the things that's really interesting is that if you compare 2 engaged people, they can look very different. On the left side here, you'll see Kathy Adams, and I just jotted down some facts when I looked through her record. So she attends typically 3 out of 4 Sundays. If there's 5 Sundays in a month, she might be 3 or 4 out of 5. But on average, out of 4 Sundays, she's there three of the 4 times. She has recurring giving set up on a monthly basis. She attends a women's Bible study, but she typically can only make it about once a month. She's not leading in any capacity, and she volunteers every summer at VBS. Okay. Another totally different person. This person is, I know a little bit more about this person. This person actually travels quite a bit for work. So he is lucky if he's able to attend Sunday worship once a month. And on this, he's part of his job. He doesn't have consistent income. He's in a sales position that causes him to travel. So he writes a check quarterly based on, how his income comes in each month. So he's not consistent in the same way that Kathy is with recurring giving, where her income is consistent. Even though he travels a lot around the weekends, he is there every Wednesday night at his community group, his small group that he leads every Wednesday night. But other than that, other than leading his group, he's not really volunteering or doing any other kind of volunteer capacity. So 2 totally different people here, right? But they're both engaged. The important thing here is not about ranking them. It's not about giving somebody gold stars. The really key thing here that we're trying to get at is, what is that baseline for a person, right? And that's what I'm showing on that previous slide is, what can you kind of expect from a trend looking back historically over a person's history and how they engage or how they interact with a church. And it's not to say that one person is better or worse than another person. We're all at different stages in our walks with the Lord and what we're able to do based on our other commitments in life, our jobs, our marriages, our other relationships. Some of us have kids, some of us don't, and we're only going to be able to engage at certain levels, right? So we want to grow people to deeper levels of engagement, but the important thing is not about trying to measure that this person is better or this person is, not doing as well. It's about, what is that baseline for a person? And so in order to find that baseline, the key question you're probably asking is, how do you do that, right? And so I'll show you a glimpse of what is to come here. There is going to be a new tab on the profile tab that's actually going to show or measure that engagement. And what you can see here is, over a historical period of time, you can see this baseline for another example here, Clark Kent. And if I zoom in on this a little bit, you'll actually see that there's a red trend line or baseline there for kind of how Clark is doing, right? And you'll see he's actually, over the last 12 weeks, he is actually becoming more engaged. That line is slightly up and to the right. And so, as Michael said earlier, you'll have some people that are trending up, and you want to learn from those people, and you want to figure out how can we maybe learn from the ministries that they're engaging in, or learning from those people so that we can hopefully help engage other people deeper. But some people will be trending maybe down to the right. And you want to, we're providing tools here that will help you find these trends. And so let me tell you how that's going to happen. We actually have some new search builder conditions, and this is one I'm spotlighting here, which is actually an engagement score change percentage, where you can actually say, I want to know people that have their engagement score is greater than 10% different than it was over this period of time. And so another example, you might want to look at people that are, it's less than 10% or down or something like that, where it's changed over a certain percentage over a certain period of time. And the action or the step that you would want to take from that is then to create a task about those people that you could assign to various people on your staff, maybe lay leaders. And you're not going to them and saying, hey, your engagement has changed. What's going on? It's, hey, what's going on in your life? I want to, let's have coffee and let's meet up and let's talk about what's going on. And as Michael said earlier, it's often tied to, the change of engagement is often tied to something going on in their life. And how great would it be for you to be able to reach out in a timely manner and care for that person while it's relevant, versus a person that you run into the grocery store and you say, hey, I actually haven't seen you in a couple of weeks at church. And I hate when I hear this story from people, but and they say, oh, well, actually, yeah, you haven't seen me in a couple of weeks. You actually haven't seen me in a year because I haven't been attending. And how embarrassing is it that you didn't know that they actually, it's been that long before you actually find out, and you're able to proactively, in the case of the grocery store, you're reactively doing it, right? These tools will help you, as Michael said. The goal is to flip that upside down. Instead of reactively, seeing at them in the grocery store and asking, this will allow you to proactively reach out to those people before it's too late. And so, these are tools that are wrapping up development right now. They're in testing. And so you might be asking, what's the next step for me? What's the next step for our church? How do I prepare for these new tools? And so first and foremost, every church defines engagement different, right? And so you need to meet and pull together the key stakeholders of your church and decide, maybe you already have this crystal clear and your church already knows these things, and you just need to then take some of the next steps. But if you don't know, what does it mean to be engaged with your church? That would be the place to start, and ask that question and figure that out. Then you need to look at the data within Touchpoint. Are you measuring those right things? It's one thing to say, we want everybody to be in a community group, or we want people to be generous, or we want people to be plugged into a affinity group, or some kind of men's or women's ministry, or some kind of discipleship group, or whatever it is that your church uses to define what it means to be engaged with your church. It's another thing to actually measure that, right? Is that data in Touchpoint? Are you taking the necessary attendance? Are the rosters up to date? Are you tracking your volunteers properly? Are you, fill in the blank, are you measuring the right things? And so you have some time to not only define what those things are, but then make sure you're measuring those things. And then you can go to the search builder, and you can actually build saved searches that when you can actually build them as status flags today. And when this new tool rolls out, there'll be new features added to them, or you could start them as saved searches, convert them to status flags later. It's up to you. The other thing I would say is important here is, if you're wanting to measure these things over time, what is the proper weighting of those various things? Not every measure of engagement is equal. Not all of them are, as important as others. And this is, again, something that is up to you and up to your church. But, draft some ideas and start coming up with some concepts around what those weights would be. And again, these weights are less to say, ranking somebody or giving somebody gold stars. It's more around figuring out what that trend line is. But you have to have some kind of way of measuring that in order to then be able to see those changes historically over time. And so that's how you can prepare for this. We're going to be talking about this more on our new features webinar next month. So hopefully you can join us there. But that is what is to come with engagement scores. And we are really excited about the opportunities to hopefully help our partner churches, you all on the call here, engage your people better, find out when there's changes of engagement, and hopefully be able to step in a timely manner to be able to care for, minister, and make those people feel loved before it's too late. And so I am going to stop here, and we have some time for Q&A.
All right, thanks, Chris. Hey, Chris, the first question that came in a while ago actually was, and you may have addressed it, but will the update have an effect on pre-existing status flags?
It will. Great question. So pre-existing status flags will be automatically converted to this new system. By default, they will just have the green color, which is the color green or blue, I forget now. Gosh, I've been messing with the colors so much. It'll have the default color. The status flag number will be the the run order, they will not be tracked historically until you go and turn that on. So they will work essentially the same way as they did before. If you had it hidden behind a role, it will be hidden behind that role that they were hidden behind. So all existing status flags that you've built will convert over to the new system. And then after this rolls out, you will be able to go in and make adjustments to that right there within that dialog box that I showed, as opposed to having to go and previously you had to do some of these settings, in some of the admin settings or other places. You will no longer have to do it there. They will be all managed right there within the status flag dialog box. So great question.
So that probably answers the follow-up, which is, so would you say then the protected status flags are going to continue to be protected?
Yes, they will continue to be protected. They will be protected. The way you protect them now is behind the role with a status flag number. And so those roles exist and they will be automatically protected behind that role. You now don't need those roles anymore. You can actually go and reassign those status flags to a different existing role if you would like. You can keep that role that you've created. You no longer have to have it named behind a role with the status flag number in it the way you used to. So and the use case of this is a lot of these flags you just want to have available to say like a general role like staff or maybe access or org leaders only. And so instead of having to assign additional roles, you can use the existing roles that already exist, and you can assign those flags to any of those roles, whatever you would like to do.
All right. So this
I see some questions here, Michael, I'm going to answer. So
okay,
when will this be available?
I was going to say, this is a long one. Will you read it?
I'll read that, but many people are asking, when is this going to be available? So I have been testing this already. The status flag part of it is all done and tested. It's been working great. We've actually been testing it for several weeks and we're very happy with the way it's working. The engagement side of it with the tracking it historically, some of the exports, some of that is still in testing. There are a few changes that we found this week that still need to be worked on that we're hoping to knock out very quickly. Because this is something that tracks historically over time, there's a lot of questions that we're still wrestling through around, making sure that we test this thoroughly over a period of time to be able to see how it works. Some of that we figured out and we know it's going to work great because we've already been able to populate the database with dummy data, or we've been able to, replicate historical times, but there's still some questions we have. So I'm not exactly confident on when. If possible, we are going to try to get it out for the June new features webinar, but I just can't commit to it quite yet. But if it's not in June, I think it'll be very soon after that. So another question here, let me just read it. So, okay, great question. Somebody's asking around kind of the historical length of tracking these. And is there flexibility in terms of the period of time, all that kind of stuff. So let me just talk about how that's going to be done. So the score will be done on a weekly basis. It's not going to be done daily. So you'll have a weekly score that will be run, and it will store that historically over time. I want to say forever, but I know we've built reports that will track it at least 5 years. I don't see any reason why we'd purge the data in the database, but I don't know also why it would be there could be reasons why it'd be useful more than 5 years old, but basically we will be doing it historically over time. The chart that I showed is showing 12 weeks at a time. However, you will have the ability to toggle and be able to see historically prior to that on that tab. So you'll be able to go individually and be able to see, like, I want to look back even further and at somebody's history. There's also going to be I think it's 2 new exports, and I know one of them actually rolls back. You pick a starting date of when you want to look, and it will look back 52 weeks. And then I think it looks back 12 quarters. So you see 12 quarterly averages and then 5 annual averages. So you'll be able to see a whole list of people. So if you wanted to see somebody's engagement of all your members over time, and obviously, you know, this is only going to start as soon as somebody sets this up, is when the data starts getting stored. So this is why I'm recommending you actually start thinking about this now, because you don't want to just set this up and be constantly adjusting it. You can adjust it, but change it as you change it, it kind of messes up the history over time, right? So you want to be thinking about this now. And it's one of the reasons why we strategically are presenting this now, so that you can be thinking about it before the tool actually launches. But basically you'll be able to have this export, and you could export all your members, and you could look and see, you know, the last 52 weeks, the last 12 quarters, which is 3 years, averages by quarter, and the last 5 years average by year. And so it'd be really powerful to be able to see that. There's another report where you'll be able to export at the individual level and be able to see the history of a status flag. I can't remember, and it actually lists all the different status flags that a person would have. I can't remember exactly how many weeks that looks back. But yes, you'll be able to track that historically. If there's not a report, you know, you could be able to access this. The person that's asking, I know, knows SQL, and you'd be able to access that through some special SQL recipes as well. So very powerful ways to be able to look at that historically. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of other things we dream up about this after the fact, as we get this in people's hands around widgets and other reports and tools. But right now, that's the plan, is the engagement tab will be able to look back by default over 12 weeks, and you can keep scrolling back for previous times, and then those 2 exports that I mentioned. Oh, Michael, I think we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Well, I thought you could read lips. I'm sorry. So my bad. We have about little less than 2 minutes. So just to kind of look ahead to next month, will we be doing the new features webinar then in lieu of what's the point, or will we be doing both?
Yes. So June is our quarterly new features webinar. So we do it at the end of each quarter. We had one, I think we had one in March. And so it's that time of year, March, April, May, June. June will be the new features webinar, and we have some very exciting things that we're going to be showing off. You got a sneak peek of this one, but there's other things that we've been talking about. They've been in testing, some things that are in beta, and we'll be showing those off at the end of June. That is the last, Michael, right? The last Thursday of June, right? Same time.
That's usually when it is, correct.
Yep. So you'll
Thank
see.
you.
Yeah, I think you'll see probably a posting about that sometime early next week, with an invite likely. So stay tuned for that.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who's joining us today. And if you are a partner church of ours, I do want to remind you that in September, we have the annual summit. So if you've not signed up, please be sure and do so. We're going to be in Austin this year. So at Greg Goulet's church, as a matter of fact. So Greg, thank you for that as well. And Greg, speaking of, thank you for joining us today and for giving us your personal insight into the importance of measuring engagement. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure. Bye.
Bye.